الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. أهلا وسهلا ومرحبا بكم. I welcome you all back to the Ship of Salvation, Imam al-Hadrami's primer on beginner Shafi'i jurisprudence. Inshallah ta'ala, we have continued to add on to our discussion. So where did we leave off? We looked at the text itself, the matan of Safinat al-Naja, and we have started our discussion with the first few introductory segments, including the author's introduction. As we also we covered the author's introduction, so we read that a few times, and then we covered the first three sections: Arkanul Islam, Arkanul Iman, and Ma'na Kalimat al-Tawheed. We also looked at a framework that is largely based on these segments and more directly on the Hadith Jibreel, what we know to be the Hadith of Sayyidina Jibreel alayhi salatu wasalam, that segments Islam into three components, which are Islam, Iman, and Ihsan. Islam, Iman, and Ihsan. So, in relation to those components, we then covered the fact that Islam has 5 cardinal pillars, and we looked at those. That Iman, or the 6 articles of faith, discusses those 6 points, and an overview of Ihsan, or excellence, which is to worship Allah as though you can see Him, and if you cannot, then with conviction that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees you. Now, what we then said was that our lessons would predominantly be covering Islam, so the 5 pillars of Islam, and then we started looking at Tahara, or cleanliness. Now, in our discussion on cleanliness, we started speaking about istinja, which is to clean yourself after utilizing the bathroom, after utilizing the toilet, and we refer to that process as istinja. And this istinja is the first concept that we looked at within Tahara. But as you can see with our pillars of Islam, you don't find Tahara featuring there. You find the testification of faith, you find Salah, you find fasting, you find Zakah, you find charity, you find pilgrimage. So where does Tahara fit in? Right? So we spoke about the fact that the reason why Tahara is given primary attention before anything else is that Tahara, or purification, is the key to the most important bodily act of worship, which is the Salah. And in relation to this, we looked at the hadith, Miftahul Jannati as-Salah, wa Miftahul Salati at-Tahur, wa fi riwayatin ukhra, wa Miftahul Salati al-Wudu. Where the Prophet ﷺ said that the keys to paradise is the prayer, and the keys to the prayer is purification, primarily referring to wudu. So this is the reason why we are looking at Tahara, or cleanliness, first. Some of the topics that we should cover within cleanliness, and we will, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, are the types of water. How do we classify water? How do we distinguish between water that we can use and water that we can't? And of course the ablution, which is this lesson. Then there are the causes of minor ritual impurity. In other words, what breaks one's wudu. Then we will also cover, and this is not in the exact tartib that we'll cover here, but these are the topics that we should cover, using the lavatory, which is what we've covered in a sense. And then purificatory bathings, or in other words, a ghusl, the dry ablution or the tayammum, menstruation, and impurities, najasa, which we've touched on, but there will be more attention given to that bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. And that leads us to the segment of text that we are busy with today. So Imam al-Hadrami now takes us to the wudu. And in relation to the wudu, Imam al-Hadrami's segment is as the rest of the kitab really goes. It is concise, it is succinct, it is to the point. So let's see what he says here, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. He says, فَصْلٌ فِي فَرَائِضِ الْوُضُوءِ. The fasl, which means a section, fi, regarding, فَرَائِضِ الْوُضُوءِ, the obligatory components of the ablution. فُرُوضُ الْوُضُوءِ سِتَّةٌ. Now I'll read the rest briefly because we will reread the segment again in different ways, in different formats. فُرُوضُ الْوُضُوءِ سِتَّةٌ. The obligations of wudu are 6. Al-awwalu an-niyatu. The first one is the intention. Al-thani ghuslu al-wajh. The second one is the washing of the face. Al-thalith ghuslu al-yadayn. The third is washing the hands. Ma'al mirfaqayn, all the way up till and including the elbows. Al-rabi'u mashu al-shay'i min al-ra's. Wiping part of the head. Al-khamisu, the fifth, ghuslu al-rijlayni ma'al ka'bayn. Washing the feet with and including the ankles. As-sadisu at-tartibu. And the sixth and final obligatory element of the ablution is at-tartibu, the sequence. So that's the first segment that we'll deal with. The second segment, faslun fi niyyati wat-tartib. Some further elaboration and clarification regarding the niyyah, regarding the intention, wat-tartib, as well as the sequence. So, قال المصنف رحمه الله تعالى النية قصد الشيء مقترنا بفعله. An intention is قصد الشيء, to intend something, to move towards something, right, or to want to do something. مقترنا, that is connected to, that is coincidental with, بفعله, with its action. In other words, with doing it. وَمَحَلُّهَا الْقَلْبُ. The place of the intention is the heart. وَالتَّلَفُّذْ بِهَا سُنَّةٌ. And wording it or verbally pronouncing it is recommended. وَوَقْتُهَا عِنْدَ غَسْلِ أَوَّلِ جُزْءٍ مِنَ الْوَجْهِ. The time for doing it is at the first washing of the face. أول جزء من الوجه. We'll speak a bit more about that. And then والترتيب, and the sequence, ألا يقدم عدو على عدو أو عدو على عدو. To not give precedence to a limb before its time. Right? To translate it in simple English, to not give preference to a limb before it is time to do so. طيب. So that's the segment of text that we'll be dealing with in this lesson, inshallah ta'ala. Now we will analyze this text word for word and try to elaborate on it so that there's clarification of every step as we proceed, bi'idhnillah. So this is the translation from the translation kitab, but I would like you to focus on the Arabic words first, and then the translation is there as a reference because we have already translated it here together. So what we are dealing with in this particular segment is فُرُوضُ الْوُضُوءِ سِتَّةٌ. That the obligatory components of the ablution are 6. Now, when we are speaking about the obligatory components of ablution, it is essential that you understand that this is not the complete wudu. This is not the complete ablution. Now, why? Because, look, there are various aspects to any act of ibadah. Firstly, is the ibadah itself obligatory or voluntary? Secondly, within the act of worship, there would be different components. There are the essentials, without which that act of worship would be considered incomplete. There are preconditions, without which you cannot even begin that act of worship. There are voluntary acts, without which the worship would still be valid, but it wouldn't be as optimal as we would like. So the way to understand this is through what we call obligatory portions, obligatory components or integrals, and sunan or voluntary or supererogatory components. What we are dealing with here are the essential elements of ablution. without which there is no ablution. So what are the essential elements of ablution? There are 6 in number. That means that if you don't have these 6 integrals, these 6 elements within your ablution, then you don't have an ablution according to the school of Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala. However, if you have these 6 components, that means you have a valid ablution. But what you would notice is that the 6 components that we will discuss is not exactly the same as the ablution that most Muslims are familiar with. That means that there are additional components. Now, those additional components are what we refer to as the sunan or supererogatory components. Now, remember, we dealt with the ahkam, we dealt with the legal rulings. So when something is sunnah or mustahab or mandub, in the Shafi'i school, that means ma yuthabu fa'iluhu wa la yu'aqabu tarikuhu. There are those actions which the one who does these actions gets rewarded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but the one who omits them will not be liable for punishment by Allah. So that's how we differentiate between the two. Now the question is, why not just learn the entire ablution? Why focus on the obligatory elements? Because it is essential to know the bare minimum in case you find yourself in a situation where you need to know the bare minimum. So let us look at this, inshallah. The first one we said is the intention, right? The person performing ablution either intends to remove a state of hadath, which means the minor ritual state of impurity, or they intend purification for the prayer. Now, the way we can think about an intention is, to put it in the words of my late teacher, rahimahullah ta'ala, it is acute consciousness of purpose. The intention, as we will come to learn about in a moment, is not referring to the words that we speak, even though it is encouraged to speak some words in order to help your heart to remember. But the intention is, look, if you start an act and I come to you and I ask you, what are you doing? And you know exactly what you are doing, that is your intention. When you get in the car to drive home from work, the moment you get into your car at work and you start your car, either you are conscious of the fact that you are going to drive home, or you are in sort of autopilot mode where you're not really aware of where you're going. It's just a mere habit that you walk to your car, you get in, you start your car, and then you're on your phone, and then you realize, I need to start driving now. Where am I going to? So that is not having an intention. The first example, the person is acutely aware of his or her purpose. And the second example, the person is oblivious to their purpose. So that's really what we are speaking about when we say an intention. So what is the person with the intention of wudu, what do they have in mind? So what they have in mind is to lift the state of minor ritual impurity or to purify themselves for the prayer. Now, the state of minor ritual impurity refers to what we speak about in Arabic as hadath. Hadath is clearly not the same as najasa. In the previous lesson, we spoke about how to remove najasa or how to clean oneself from filth. When one takes ablution, you are not cleaning yourself from filth, but you are lifting a state of minor spiritual impurity. And that basically means the absence of wudu. So you are removing the state of not having ablution, as opposed to the major state of ritual impurity, which is the ghusl. You take a ghusl to lift the state of hadathul akbar, the major state of ritual impurity, which you can roughly translate as a state of defilement or sexual defilement. I'm not sure if the implications of that word is completely fitting, but for lack of a better expression, that's the difference. So, in other words, we have the removal of najas, which we dealt with already. Then you have the lifting of the state of minor ritual impurity, which is the removal of hadath, which is what we are currently discussing. And then what remains after this lesson is lifting the state of major ritual impurity, which refers to the ghusl. And in Arabic, that ghusl is removing the hadathul akbar, the major state of ritual impurity, and Allah knows best. So when the person proceeds to perform wudu, The intention that they should have is to, as you can see in the translation there, in note number 12, it says, the person performing ablution either intends removing a state of hadath, minor ritual impurity, or purification for the salah, for the prayer. Then the next major integral that is discussed here is washing the face, ghaslul wajh. And in terms of washing the face, it is important that when the mutawaddi, the person performing wudu, what do we call a person performing wudu? We call him a mutawaddi. So we call the action, we call wudu. The person performing the wudu is called a mutawaddi, the person performing wudu. And what should they wash? They should wash from the top of the hairline if it is a usual hairline, meaning the person doesn't have, male pattern baldness or a complete bald head or any other sort of non-usual, non-regular hairline, but the usual hairline from the top till beneath the chin in terms of length, and from the one ear to the other ear in terms of breadth. That is what must be covered for the washing of the face. Further, washing the face also means washing every segment of the face. The water should reach beneath the hairs, right? And this happens naturally. This happens if you take a handful of water and you rub it on the entire face, water would reach all those areas. The one exception to this is if a man has a thick beard, not a thinnish beard, but a thick beard. There, he doesn't need to ensure that the water covers everything and through everything. He washes the face and the exterior of the beard and then passes wet fingers through the beard, and that would be sufficient for washing the face. One wash is the minimum requirement. As long as it is washed once, then the face has been washed. Now, when we spoke about, just to backstep a bit, when we spoke about the intention, meaning that acute awareness of what is it that I'm doing? Yes, I'm performing an ablution to go and pray, or I'm performing ablution to lift the state of minor ritual impurity. We will speak about this in the next slide as to when exactly should a person have this intention. When should the person be acutely aware of what he or she is about to undertake? Because that is also part of the intention, that when the intention must occur. So keep that in mind, inshallah. The next component that we look at after washing the face is ghaslul yadayn ma'al mirfaqayn. Now, ghasl means to wash, whereas ghusl means that purificatory bath. Yadayn refers to the two hands, but the word yad in Arabic doesn't only refer to the hand up to the wrist, it also refers to the entire arm, right? So the word yad can refer to the hand, and usually we refer to just this part. But the word yad can also refer to the entire forearm, and in this instance, especially because of the word ilal mirfaqayn, we know that it is speaking about the entire forearm. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala a'lam. So what needs to be washed for the wudu to be valid is to wash both hands and arms, including the elbows. So if you look at the notes, washing both arms completely up to and including the elbows also once. Remember, we're speaking about the bare minimum. We are not speaking about the optimal. We will get to the optimal. So to wash from the fingertips all the way down to the elbows, and beyond, because it has to include the elbows. That is what is required for washing the hands. Now the hands, again, in Arabic, it's arms all the way up till the elbows, and Allah knows best. The next component, mashu shay'in min ar-ra's, to wipe part of the head. So what is the minimal wiping of the head? As you can see here in our footnote, the minimum is to wipe part of a single hair, provided this part does not hang below the limit of the head, in other words, below the hairline. So what does that mean? So this is the head. Here is the hairline, right, of the head. This here is not considered part of the head, hair that is in here is not considered part of the head, or the hair that's long but it hangs below the hairline here, that's not considered part of the head. So for the Shafi'i school, there's an emphasis at looking at the linguistic meaning of what it means to wipe part of the head. So the minimum that would linguistically justify being called wiping part of the head is to wipe part of a single hair. And that in the Shafi'i school is considered sufficient for the wiping of the head. However, in other schools, that is not sufficient. Now, I'm not going to get into the details of it, but in other schools of law, one has to wipe much more than just a single part of the head. Some are of the opinion that it must be 3 hairs. Others say, well, at least quarter of the hair on the head. So it's not advisable to stick to the bare minimum. For what reason? Not because it's invalid in the Shafi'i school. It's valid in the Shafi'i school. But where we find the opportunity to make what is called khuruj min al-khilaf, to step outside of the area of differences of opinion, where some scholars say something is valid and others say it is invalid, then rather do that which is considered to be valid by all of those scholars, and then you know with certainty that your action is safe. Is this necessary? Is this a rule that you must follow? No, it is regarded as mustahab, it is regarded as commendable. So in an instance such as this, where wiping the head is not a difficult task, it's not something that's going to cause you much burden, it's not going to be very cumbersome, ideally you would want to wipe the entire head, right? Because that is the recommendation. But the point here is that if for some reason you could only manage to wipe part of a single hair, then know that that minimum has been met according to the preponderant view in the Shafi'i school of thought. Wallahu subhanahu wa ta'ala a'lam. And again, this must be done once to meet the minimum requirements. Thereafter, غسل الرجلين مع الكعبين. In a similar fashion to the arms, washing the feet along with and including the ankles. This again means to pass the water with one's hands, rubbing over the entire area of the foot, covering everything with water, in between the toes, on the ankles, etc. And this complete coverage of the foot with water in a washing manner, this is referred to as the minimum requirement for washing the feet. Of course, both feet must be included. Note that washing is not the same as wiping. In some of the integrals, as you can see here, we spoke about, for example, masah, wiping part of the head. But here we speak about غسل الرجلين, غسل اليدين, غسل الوجه. What is the difference between wiping and washing? Wiping is to take a wet hand and simply pass it over something, and that is sufficient. So a wet hand, pass it over the hair, that is considered wiping the head. But washing the face is to take the water in one's hands and to bring it to the face and to wash the face using the hands, as that is referred to as washing. So the same thing applies to the feet as opposed to just wiping the feet, right? If you speak later on about the masah, the wiping of the socks, wiping of the khufs, etc., that there refers to wiping. But for a person performing a usual wudu, that person has to wash the feet, and Allah knows best. طيب, we can proceed. Look at the footnote here. What does he say? Okay, so there is no footnote in relation to washing the feet, so we can continue. What is the final element of the minimal obligatory elements of the ablution? It is at-tartibu, the sequence. The sequence which is النية غسل الوجه غسل اليدين مع المرفقين مسح الشيء من الرأس غسل الرجلين مع الكعبين الترتيب. That is the sequence to follow from the niyyah all the way through till the washing of the feet, and to observe that exact sequence from 1 to 5 is based on what? It's based on the ayah, the verse in the Quran in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in Surah Ma'idah verse number 6, بعد أن أقول أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا, O believers, إذا قمتم إلى الصلاة, when you stand to pray, فاغسلوا وجوهكم, then wash your faces, وأيديكم, and your hands, meaning your arms, إلى المرافق, up to and including your elbows, وامسحوا برؤوسكم, and wipe your heads, وأرجلكم, as well as your feet, إلى الكعبين, till your ankles, meaning up to and including your ankles. So this verse, the verse carries on, but this is the segment that primarily concerns us here. This verse indicates the limbs that we just discussed, right? So all of those limbs and elements are mentioned. But where did the niyyah come from? Because the verse didn't mention anything about the niyyah. So throughout the Shafi'i school, the emphasis on the niyyah comes predominantly from verses such as وَمَا أُمِرُوا إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ مُخْلِصِينَ لَهُ الدِّينَ حُنَفًا. They have not been commanded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ, except to serve Allah mukhlisin, sincerely for Him, lahuddin, devoting their religion to Him. And other evidence such as إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, the actions are only according to their intentions. So that hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, well-known hadith, forms a basis for the Shafi'i school that everything you do, every act of worship, you have to be acutely conscious of the purpose for which you are undertaking that act of worship, and you cannot enter into it in a state of oblivion. Now, there's a lot of confusion about the intention, so that is why the author has included another section here, especially related to the intention. So let us look at that, inshallah ta'ala. This segment teaches us that qasdu shay muqtarinan bifi'lihi. What is the intention? It is the acute awareness of something, the intention, the inclination towards something, muqtarinan, that is accompanied by or coincidental with bifi'lihi, its action. Wa mahalluha al-qalbu, and the place of the intention is in the heart. Wa talaffuz biha sunnatun, and to verbalize it is recommended. So firstly, the intention is to intend something simultaneously with the action. Its place is in the heart, and to make a verbal intention is a sunnah, it is a recommendation. So that is going to clarify quite a bit. Because here, the author clearly distinguishes between the actual intention and the verbalization of the intention. That means that the verbalization is not the intention itself. The verbalization is an expression of the actual intention. So where's the actual intention? In the heart. So in my earlier example, the person gets into the car and is about to drive, right? Do we start the car and say, I am driving home, I'm going to take that highway, and then I'm going to take the off-ramp, and then I'm going to go down that road? We don't do that. We get in the car, we know exactly where we are going, and then we start the car and we drive. But maybe you find yourself in a state of disarray because you've been handling meetings and you've been answering phone calls, and you were on the phone when you got in the car, and you're just frantic, and then you're sitting there and then you tell yourself, hey, we better get going, and then you start the car and you go. This is the difference between having the intention in the heart and verbalizing it. So that person was reminding himself or herself to get into the spirit of things and to focus now, and then to start driving the car. So the intention is what is in the heart, what is in the mind, and the verbalization is when we use an expression like nawaitu fard al-wudu'i lillahi ta'ala. For example, I intend to undertake the ablution for the sake of Allah. As long as you have acute consciousness of the purpose that you are undertaking, the person, when they start the ablution process, they're not waking up from sleep, washing their hands, brushing their teeth. They happen to be washing their face, which is what everybody does. And then they all of a sudden they wake up and they realize, hey, I'm actually performing wudu here. So let me just carry on. I washed my face already. I washed my hands already. I washed my mouth already. Let me just carry on. And then they continue to their arms and their head and their feet. There's a problem here, because at the time of washing your face, you had no intention of ablution. You were just washing your face in an ordinary sense, as anybody else would do when they wake up in the morning. And that there is the importance of acute consciousness of purpose. Another example to really drive the point home is two individuals. They both jump into the ocean. And of course, that requires explanation as to how we can use the ocean, etc. But the one individual intends that I'm going to perform an ablution in the water. The other individual doesn't have any such intention. So both of them come from their swim, and it happens to be the time for salah. So the one says to the other one, let's pray. And what happens? Now they figure out that one of them has ablution, the other one doesn't, even though they both did exactly the same thing, the same actions. Because the one, he was acutely conscious of the fact that he's going to be performing wudu. And when he jumped in, he had that acute awareness. The other one just happened to be swimming. And after the fact, he decided, look, I did wash all the limbs of wudu, so therefore I have wudu, or even ghusl for that matter. Here, this person did not have acute consciousness of purpose. Using the same example, the individuals jumping in the water, they could perhaps not have said a thing. They just jumped in. The one was acutely aware of what he was doing. I'm doing ablution. He didn't say anything, and that's fine. He still had the intention. Had he verbalized it, as he jumps in, he says, I'm performing wudu now, and then he jumps in. That's verbalizing the intention, and we have to draw the distinction between the two. Wallahu subhanahu wa ta'ala a'lam. So now we can look at the next segment. He says, وَوَقْتُهَا عِنْدَ غَسْلِ أَوَّلِ جُزْءٍ مِنَ الْوَجْهِ. Where is it required for us to have the intention? Where is it required for us to have the intention? Its time is at the beginning of washing the first portion of the face. Why the beginning of washing the first portion of the face? Because, as you can remember in our previous slide, washing the face is the first obligatory element within the ablution, right? It's not the hands, it's not the mouth, it's the face. That's the first element that must be washed in the ablution. So it's necessary that when you start the first obligatory element, that you are acutely conscious of your purpose. Now the obvious question here is, so what happens to the person who has the intention when he starts the ablution, as in washing the hands? That's good. It's recommended to have acute consciousness of what you are doing from the very outset, so that the washing of the hands and the mouth and the nose, they are rewarded as acts of the ablution. That's good, it's praiseworthy, it's recommended. However, what this is saying is, it is absolutely required that you are still acutely conscious of your purpose at the time of washing your face. So you didn't start, for example, you washed your hands, your mouth, your nose, then your phone rang and you started speaking to somebody on the phone. You had the intention when you started. Now you're speaking to the person on the phone and you're getting lost in the conversation, and then through the process you realize, oh, you're still in the bathroom, and then you start washing the face also. But you're not really conscious of what you are doing. That there is lacking the intention. And only the individual can know whether they had acute consciousness of purpose or not. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of course, as well. So this is a matter of the heart, and Allah knows best. Now, the next element the author mentions, وَالتَّرْتِيبُ أَلَّا يُقَدِّمَ عَضْوٌ عَلَى عَضْوٍ أو عَضْوًا عَلَى عَضْوٍ. The tartib, in other words, the sequence, which is the final obligatory element, is to observe the sequence of the ablution such that no latter limb of wudu should precede a former limb. Now, where do we get this from? Remember, we spoke about the ayah, إِذَا كُمْتُمْ إِلَى الصَّلَاةِ فَاغْسِلُوا وُجُوهَكُمْ. So, the Shafi'i school takes its impetus for the sequence from what Allah mentions and in the way that Allah mentions it. So the qaida, the principle employed here is ibda'u bima bada Allahu bi, that we begin with what Allah began with. So Allah began with the washing of the face, then the arms, etc. So we follow that same sequence, and because the Prophet ﷺ is only reported to have fulfilled his ablution in that way. And there are a few other points that we could perhaps add on, but this covers the obligatory elements of the ablution, and Allah knows best. Now, what's left, what we have to now do is complete the story. So we know the obligatory elements of the wudu. We know how to take the wudu as far as the minimum requirements are concerned. So if I'm in a fix, I'm in a pinch, I need to just do what is absolutely necessary. As long as I have those 6 elements, I have an ablution, right? According to the Shafi'i school. But naturally, we don't just want to do what is minimal for the sake of Allah. We want to try to do that which is best for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we also learn about all of the additional supererogatory or voluntary elements. Now, we've already completed the text itself. So the text, as far as Safinat al-Naja is concerned, has been covered for the elements of ablution. Now we're going to have additional notes so that we can have a better understanding of the optimal way of performing ablution, which is as follows. Bismillah. So number one is to recite the ta'awudh. This means that before you commence with the ablution, to recite A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Naturally, if you are in a toilet, in other words, today what we have is the bathroom and the toilet is in one. Most of the time, there was a time where predominantly toilets and bathrooms were separate. So if you're in the bathroom, you can say A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. But if there's a toilet, now it creates a problem. So in cases such as that, all you have to do is internally to yourself, without verbalizing anything, say A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Right? So don't verbalize anything, think it in the mind. Then to also say the basmala, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Now, why the ta'awudh and the basmala? Just as in salah, the ta'awudh, because when we undertake something of good, shaitan will try to distract us. One of the ways shaitan tries to distract people in their ablution and in their prayer is through waswasa, making you obsess about, did you wash this properly? Did you wash that properly? Did the water cover every single point? If you start falling into that particular issue, then you need to take serious action, because it can become very frustrating and very difficult. So many people are afflicted by waswasa. So here's a general rule to start off with, since we are speaking about shaitan in that regard. If you are afflicted by waswasa as far as washing the limbs are concerned, then you stick to only the bare minimum and don't do a single thing beyond that. In other words, don't wash your limbs 3 times each. Don't be thorough and try to make sure that the water covered everywhere. You wash that limb once. You're only allowed to wash, for example, the arm. You're only allowed to wash it once, and that's it. Move away, because you need to fight shaitan in this regard. Shaitan will make you wash it again and again and again and again, and you'll spend hours there. So that's how we get rid of shaitan. You ignore everything else and you just fight that waswasa until it goes away. For people who are not afflicted by this, walillahi alhamd, make sure that you follow through with everything else. So you start off with the ta'awudh, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, then the basmala, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Then we continue. Now you wash your hands up to and including the wrist 3 times. This is not the washing of the arms that is obligatory. This is the washing of the hands only, right? So up to and including the wrist. And it is done with the right hand side and the left hand side simultaneously in this fashion, as opposed to washing first the right, then the left, which is applicable in the other instances, which we'll also comment on. Number 3, to use the siwak or the miswak or a toothstick or a toothbrush. And if you don't have that, then even the finger to clean the mouth. And then to rinse the mouth with 3 handfuls of water, right? And to gargle the mouth slightly, so to allow the water to reach the back of the throat. And the way that is generally recommended, and there are different ways of doing this, is to take 1 handful of water, sip some of the water into the mouth, and sniff the rest of the water into the nose. So you actually like draw it into the nose like that, which burns a bit. If you're not accustomed to it, especially, it burns a bit. It's wonderful for the sinuses. It clears everything out. And then after gargling the mouth, to spit the water out and to excavate the area of the nose by blowing the water out using the fingers to assist. And to do this 3 times, after which you clean the nostrils with the small finger. And that is the optimal way of washing the mouth along with the nose. Also, don't forget that when you bring the water up into your mouth, to tilt your head back and to gargle some of the water, so you know you are quite thorough in that regard. Notice we also mentioned the siwak. The Prophet ﷺ specifically emphasized the using of the siwak at the time of the ablution, and this is why we do that. It increases the reward so much more. So let's try to do that. And some practices with the siwak, that are somewhat neglected is purification of the siwak. So before you use the siwak, you rinse the siwak as you would with a toothbrush. After you use the siwak, you rinse the siwak as you do with a toothbrush. And if you're going to be carrying the siwak around with you all day, that's perfectly fine, but try to get it in some sort of a protection. And keep it clean, because hygiene is important. It doesn't mean that because it's something that we utilize based on the Sunnah that we don't have to be hygienic with it. It somehow magically cleans itself. No, it's specifically recommended at the time of ablution, so that is something you can consider. I'm afraid that I think it's a bit unhygienic to just take something out of your pocket, brush your teeth, put it back in your pocket, take it out of your pocket, and so on. And Allah knows best. So that's an observation that we can perhaps think about. Then after number 3, we go to number 4, which is to wash the entire face from the point where the hairline usually begins to the chin in length, from ear to ear in width. That's what we spoke about already. Now, in addition, to do this 3 times. It is obligatory to wash all facial hair, inner, outer, as well as the skin beneath the hair, whether the hair is thick or thin, such as the eyebrows, the moustache, and so forth, except for the thick beard, which we also covered. Then we can move on to number 5, wash both arms completely up to and including the elbows 3 times. And it is sunnah to pass the fingers through one another. So especially with relation to the arms, to pass the fingers through each other when you wash the arms, that is considered to be sunnah. Then number 6, to wipe the head by passing the wet hands from the front of the head, sliding the paired hands to the back of the nape of the neck, and then return them to the point of commencement 3 times. So to wipe part of the hair on the head, that is recommended, but the optimum is to take wet hands, to pass the hands from the front of the head to the back here till it reaches the nape of the neck, and then to bring it back forward to the front, and that would be considered once, and then to do it again is considered 3 times, and again 3 times, again to complete the 3 times washing. That is what is recommended as far as the sunnah of washing the hair is concerned. Again, that's not the minimal. We spoke about the minimal. This is more the optimal, and Allah knows best. Number 7, to wipe the inside of the ears with the fingertips and the outside with the thumbs with fresh water 3 times. So you take your index finger and you place that on the inner ear, so that would wipe all the areas of the ear, and the thumb would go in the outer ear on both sides simultaneously, and you do this 3 times. Then number 8, to wash the feet up to and including the ankles 3 times, allowing the water to pass between the toes by using the little finger of the left hand, beginning with the little toe of the right foot and ending with the little toe on the left. Okay? Then number 9, during wudu, it is sunnah to wash the limbs successively. This means that while it would still be valid if you were to take breaks between the limbs, for some reason or the other, it is recommended not to do so, but rather to wash the limbs in quick succession. So why is this beneficial? Because should you take a break, let's say you finished half of your ablution and then the doorbell rang and you were afraid if you were to complete your ablution, the person may leave. So you stopped and you ran to the door to open the door, answer the door, so now you're taking a break. Can you just go back and continue the ablution from where you left off? Absolutely, it's permissible. It's not recommended, but it's permissible. So that's what succession means. Then to begin with the right when washing the arms and legs, but the hands, the cheeks, and the ears, these are washed simultaneously, right? And then to begin with the top of the face as opposed to the bottom of the face, and also not to splash the water onto it. Then to avoid splashing water onto oneself. So to try to, as you're performing wudu, allow the water that you've used to wash yourself with to flow away, as opposed to splash on your clothing. This is not najasa water. It's not filthy water. It's simply used water, right? It's used water. So it's not considered clean also, but it's not dirty. It's just used. So ideally, don't let it splash onto you, but it's not something that is of critical importance such that if it does splash onto you, there's a problem, right? There isn't any, and Allah knows best. And then finally, it is recommended to face the direction of the Qibla, because that is the best of directions to do good things in, and not to talk except for necessity, and also very, very importantly, not to waste water. Subhanallah. Just because we are doing an act of worship doesn't give us the right to abuse the resource, this precious resource called water. And there's a narration in the Sunnah of Ibn Majah, wherein the Prophet ﷺ says, to conserve the usage of water, even if you are performing ablution at the bank of a river. And regardless of the authenticity of the narration itself, the general Sunnah teaches us to be environmentally conscious and to leave as small a footprint as possible. When it comes to ablution, the Sunnah recommends us to use between 500 and 750 milliliters of water for an ablution, to try to not use less and also to try to not use more. So that's about a mud of water. So, the general size of a cool drink bottle, the small cool drink bottle, that's in South Africa at least, that's about 500 milliliters. And that is about the amount that you should use for your ablution. And you can fulfill everything of the ablution with that amount of water. There is absolutely no need to waste water. So don't leave the tap running, right? Don't leave the tap running, and don't perform ablution excessively so that you use much more water than that. That would be completely contrary to the Sunnah. Wallahu subhanahu wa ta'ala a'lam. So now we proceed to conclude here with some final notes, and that is to look at the obligatory elements along with the Sunnah elements. So the ablution has 6 obligatory integrals, which we spoke about right at the beginning. That is what you see in red and in bold here. And the Sunnah elements is what we're going to be adding to it now. That is what you see in the black. So you'll have this in your notes. It may not be red and black if it's printed out, but you will find it to be bold and not bold, right? So this is to add the Sunnah elements to the Fard elements. And then finally, the last Sunnah element that I'd like to add, it's not mentioned in the text, but it is something to take note of. It is important because it's part of the Sunnah, is the supplication of the Prophet ﷺ, which after the wudu is to say, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. I bear witness that there is none worthy of worship besides Allah, and that He is alone, He has no partners, and I bear witness that Muhammad ﷺ is His servant and His messenger. Then to add, Allahumma ja'alni min at-tawwabina, O Allah, make me of those who repent, wa ja'alni min al-mutatahhirina, and make me of those who purify. And then in some additional supplication wording, wa ja'alni min ibadika salihin, and make me of your pious servants, and Allah knows best. Now that concludes the wudu from the ship of salvation, because it covers only the essential elements. We've added the recommended elements, right? Because that is what we should strive for. And then there are some sunan which also doesn't have a specific section in the ship of salvation. I thought I'd include that in this lesson, but I think based on where we are at currently, that it would be best to include it in the next lesson as a start, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. And then just a reminder to revise the rules that we constantly refer to. I think you've seen that now already, that there are 5 rulings that we constantly refer to, that refer to permissibility or otherwise of any given action. And those 5 rulings are wajib, mandub, wajib or fard, mandub, sunnah or mustahab, mubah, then makruh, and haram. If you are not familiar with those terms yet and their definitions, I've included it within these notes as well. So for the students who have registered for the course, do make sure to browse through the notes and to commit this to memory. It's not a lot of theory, but by committing the little bit of theory into your day-to-day life, it will help you tremendously in terms of navigating your worship, and it will improve your worship so much more, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. So do make sure to cover that thoroughly. So that concludes our lesson. Where are we at? We've covered the objectives, the contents, the segments on Islam and Iman, the discussion on duty, boundedness or responsibility, the discussion on istinja, and now in this lesson we've covered the ablution. So we've essentially covered the first segment of the text. We will now proceed to the other segments. Finally, a summary. In this lesson we revised what we've covered before. Then we looked in detail at the integrals of ablution, the intention and sequence of ablution, and then finally the Sunnah method of ablution. And that is all that we would cover today. Jazakumullahu khairan. Until next time, inshallah. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad. Subhanallahi wa bihamdi. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. Nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta. Nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum